For 15 years, everyone believed Samantha Cross was dead, killed in action during a classified mission that never officially existed. But when the president's daughter was kidnapped from her elite prep school, the quiet janitor mopping floors in the background would reveal herself to be America's most lethal operative, hiding in plain sight and ready to wage war to save an innocent life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Oakwood Preparatory School, one of the most exclusive educational institutions on the East Coast. With its ivy-covered brick buildings, manicured lawns, and wrought-iron gates, Oakwood was where America's elite sent their children. Senators' kids walked the same halls as tech billionaires' offspring, and the president's own daughter, Madison Garrett, was just another face in the crowd of privilege. At least, that's how it was supposed to look. Maria Valdez pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the main academic building, her movements quiet and efficient. She'd been working at Oakwood for 8 months now, arriving before dawn and leaving after the last student departed. To everyone who noticed her at all, she was simply part of the background. The middle-aged Latina woman who emptied trash cans and mopped floors while wearing the same unremarkable gray uniform every day. "Excuse me," called out Ashley Richardson, a senior whose father owned half of the pharmaceutical companies in the country. "You missed a spot by the water fountain." Maria looked up from her mop, her dark eyes meeting Ashley's for just a moment. "Sí, señorita. I fixed right now." Ashley rolled her eyes and continued down the hall with her friends. Their designer backpacks and perfectly styled hair was a stark contrast to Maria's worn sneakers and pulled-back hair held with a simple rubber band. To them, she was invisible, just another service worker whose name they didn't know and whose existence barely registered. But Maria noticed everything about them. She knew Ashley's schedule down to the minute, knew that Bradley Morrison, the senator's son, had been struggling with anxiety attacks that he hid from his parents. And she knew that Madison Garrett, the president's daughter, was far more observant than her Secret Service detail gave her credit for. As Maria continued her work, she moved with an economy of motion that suggested more than just years of janitorial experience. Her eyes constantly swept the hallway, noting exit points, blind spots, and the positioning of the discreet security cameras that most people never noticed. When a new substitute teacher entered the building, Maria cataloged his height, weight, and the slight bulge under his left arm that suggested he was carrying a concealed weapon. Probably just another federal agent assigned to the president's daughter's protection detail. "Morning, Maria," called out Mr. Peterson, the head of maintenance. He was one of the few staff members who actually acknowledged her existence with anything resembling friendliness. "Buenos dias, Señor Peterson," she replied, her accent thick but her pronunciation careful. "The heating system in Building C, it makes strange noise yesterday. Maybe you check." Peterson paused, pulling out his tablet to make a note. "Strange noise? What kind?" "Like clicking every 30 seconds, maybe. Could be nothing, but—" She shrugged, as if embarrassed to have mentioned it. No, that's good. Better safe than sorry with these old systems. I'll have someone take a look today." What Peterson didn't know was that Maria had already identified the noise as a loose coupling in the HVAC system that could be exploited as an entry point if someone knew what they were doing. She'd also noted that the repair would require shutting down the building's climate control for approximately 40 minutes, creating a predictable disruption in the daily routine. These were the kinds of details that most people missed, but that could matter in ways they couldn't imagine. As the morning progressed, students began arriving for their first classes. The hallways filled with the chatter of teenagers discussing weekend plans, homework assignments, and the usual social dramas that seemed so important at 17. Maria continued her work, moving through the building like a ghost, present but unnoticed. She was emptying a trash can near the main office when she overheard Vice Principal Jennifer Walsh talking to the school's head of security, Captain Noah Pierce. "The Secret Service wants to adjust Madison's schedule again," Walsh was saying, her voice frustrated. "Something about a credible threat that requires additional precautions." Pierce, a former military man whose bearing still showed his years of service, nodded grimly. "Third time this month? poor kid can't even have a normal school experience. It's not fair to her, Walsh agreed. She's already isolated enough. These constant security changes just make it worse. Maria continued her work, but her movements had become slightly more deliberate. Her ears strained to catch every word of the conversation, and her mind automatically began processing the security implications of any schedule changes. "When do the new protocols take effect?" Pierce asked. "Starting tomorrow, and they want us to implement some additional screening procedures for all staff, including the maintenance and cleaning crews." Pierce glanced around the hallway, his eyes passing over Maria without really seeing her. Probably not a bad idea. Can't be too careful these days. As the two administrators walked away, Maria finished her task and moved on to the next hallway. But something had changed in her demeanor. The casual efficiency of her movements had been replaced by something more purposeful, more alert. To a trained observer, it might have looked like a soldier who had just received new intelligence about potential threats in the area. But there were no trained observers watching Maria Valdez. She was just the cleaning lady, after all. The rest of the morning passed quietly, with Maria completing her assigned tasks while maintaining her careful surveillance of the school's rhythms and routines. She noted which teachers were running late, which students seemed more nervous than usual, and which members of the security staff were paying closer attention to their surroundings. During the lunch period, while most of the school was focused on food and social interactions, Maria found herself working near the library where Madison Garrett often spent her free time. The president's daughter was sitting alone at a corner table, ostensibly reading, but actually watching the people around her with the same careful attention that Maria had been employing all morning. For just a moment, their eyes met across the room. Madison's gaze lingered on Maria's face, as if trying to remember where she might have seen her before. There was an intelligence in the girl's eyes that reminded Maria of someone else she had once known, someone who had also learned to see beyond the surface of things. Then the moment passed, and Madison returned to her book while Maria resumed her cleaning. But both of them had noticed something in that brief exchange, some recognition that neither could quite place. As the afternoon wore on, Maria completed her rounds and prepared to leave for the day. She gathered her supplies, clocked out with the maintenance supervisor, and walked toward the staff parking area where her unremarkable Honda Civic waited among the other service vehicles. But before she reached her car, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Package delivery scheduled for tomorrow. Recipient confirmation required." Maria stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. But her hand was shaking slightly as she put the phone back in her pocket. 15 years of careful invisibility, of building a life where no one asked questions and no one looked too closely. 15 years of being Maria Valdez, the quiet cleaning lady who spoke broken English and drew no attention to herself. But some packages, once sent, could never be returned. And some deliveries changed everything. As she drove away from Oakwood Preparatory School, Maria caught sight of Madison Garrett in her rearview mirror, walking toward the student pickup area with her discreet Secret Service escort. The girl looked so young, so unaware of the forces that might already be moving against her. Maria had spent years learning not to care, not to get involved, not to let the old instincts take over. But as she watched the president's daughter disappear into the crowd of students and parents, she felt something stirring inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. The feeling that someone needed protection and that she might be the only one who could provide it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and new choices. But tonight, Maria Valdez would go home to her small apartment, heat up a frozen dinner, and pretend that she was just another invisible woman living an unremarkable life. The question was, how much longer that pretense would last. The next morning at Oakwood Preparatory arrived with an undercurrent of tension that most people couldn't quite identify. Maria Valdez clocked in at her usual time, 5:30 a.m. But today, she moved through the empty hallways with heightened awareness. The cryptic message from the night before had triggered protocol she'd hoped never to use again. As she began her morning routine, Maria noticed things that would have escaped most people's attention. The delivery truck that had been parked across the street for the past 3 days had changed position slightly. The new substitute teacher from yesterday was back, despite the fact that Mrs. Henderson had returned from her sick leave, and there were 2 additional maintenance workers she'd never seen before, supposedly from the heating company Peterson had called. "Maria," Mr. Peterson's voice echoed down the hallway as he approached with his clipboard. "Thanks for that tip about the heating system yesterday. The repair crew found a serious issue that could have become dangerous." She looked up from mopping, careful to maintain her humbled demeanor. "Is good they fix, yes? Safety is importante." "Absolutely. Hey, I don't suppose you noticed anything else unusual lately? Any people who don't belong, strange vehicles, that sort of thing?" The question was casual, but Maria caught the slight tension in Peterson's voice. Someone had asked him to ask her. "Unusual? No, senor. But—" She hesitated, as if uncertain whether to speak. "What is it?" "The men who fixed the heating yesterday, they ask many questions about the school schedule, when students arrive, when they leave. Maybe is normal, but—" She shrugged apologetically. Peterson's expression sharpened. "What kind of questions exactly?" "They want to know about the student pickup area, where parents wait. And they ask about security cameras, where they point. I tell them I just clean. I don't know these things." "You did right to mention it," Peterson said, his voice now carrying a note of concern. "I'll pass that information along to Captain Pierce." As Peterson hurried away, Maria continued her work, but her mind was racing. The heating repair crew had indeed asked those questions, but they'd asked them to the wrong person. Maria Valdez, the cleaning lady, wouldn't know about security protocols or camera coverage, but Samantha Cross, the former Delta Force operative, had memorized every inch of the school's security infrastructure within her first week on the job. 20 minutes later, Captain Pierce approached her near the main entrance, his security badge glinting in the morning light. Unlike Peterson, Pierce moved with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat, and his eyes held the kind of suspicion that kept people alive in dangerous situations. "Maria," he said, his tone friendly but probing, "Mr. Peterson tells me you had some concerns about the repair crew yesterday." "Sí, Capitan Pierce. Maybe is nothing, but they seem very interesado in things not about heating." Pierce nodded, studying her face carefully. "Have you seen anything like that before, in your experience working at schools?" It was a test question, and Maria recognized it immediately. Pierce was trying to establish if she was really just a nervous cleaning lady or someone with actual security awareness. She chose her words carefully. "I work at many places before, senor. Sometimes people pretend to be workers, but they look for other things. Steal equipment, maybe." Or she lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Sometimes they look for information about rich families." What made you think these men were different from normal repair workers? Maria paused, appearing to think carefully. "Their hands, senor, very clean, no calluses. And their tools, all brand new. Real repairman, their tools have marks from use." Pierce's eyebrows rose slightly. It was exactly the kind of detail a security professional would notice, not something most civilians would pick up on. "You're very observant, Maria." "My papa, he was carpenter. He'd teach me to notice these things." The explanation was plausible, but Pierce continued to study her with interest. "Have you ever had any security training? Military service, perhaps?" "Oh, no, senor. I just clean and try to stay safe. My neighborhood in Los Angeles is not always good place. You learn to watch for trouble." Before Pierce could ask more questions, his radio crackled to life. "Captain Pierce to the main office, priority 1. Excuse me, Maria. Thank you for the information. If you notice anything else unusual, please find me immediately." As Pierce hurried away, Maria felt a familiar tension building in her chest. The pieces were moving faster now, and she could sense the web of surveillance and counter-surveillance tightening around the school. Someone was planning something, and Madison Garrett was almost certainly the target. During her lunch break, Maria positioned herself near the administrative offices where she could overhear conversations while appearing to clean the water fountains. What she learned made her blood run cold.
"The FBI is taking the threat seriously," Vice Principal Walsh was saying to Pierce and another man Maria didn't recognize. They want to move Madison to a secure location until they can assess the credibility of the intelligence. What's the nature of the threat? The unknown man asked. His voice carried the crisp authority of federal law enforcement. Kidnapping attempt, Pierce replied. Multiple intelligence sources are pointing to something planned for this week. The president has been briefed. What about increasing her protective detail here instead of moving her? Walsh suggested. The poor girl has been through so many disruptions already. The federal agent shook his head. Too risky. Oakwood is too open, too many variables. We need controlled environment until we can identify and neutralize the threat. When do you want to make the move? Pierce asked. Tomorrow morning. We'll tell Madison tonight and her detail will escort her out during first period. Make it look like a routine security drill. As the group dispersed, Maria continued her cleaning with mechanical efficiency, but her mind was analyzing everything she'd heard. A credible kidnapping threat, multiple intelligence sources, federal involvement, and a plan to move Madison that would take her away from the one place where Maria could protect her. That afternoon, as students moved between classes, Maria found herself working near Madison's locker when the girl arrived to gather her books. The teenager looked stressed, her usual composed demeanor showing cracks of anxiety. "Excuse me, miss," Madison said politely. "Could you help me reach something on the top shelf?" It was the first time the president's daughter had spoken directly to her, and Maria felt the weight of those intelligent eyes studying her face. "Of course, señorita." As Maria retrieved the book Madison had indicated, the girl spoke quietly. "You've been watching me, haven't you?" The question was direct and unexpected. Maria kept her expression neutral. Sorry, señorita, I don't understand." "I notice things too," Madison said softly. "And I've noticed that you're always around when my security detail changes position. You're always working in areas where you can see potential problems. That's not coincidence." Maria handed her the book, their fingers brushing briefly. In that moment of contact, she made a decision that would change everything. "Be very careful tomorrow, señorita," she whispered, so quietly that only Madison could hear. "Sometimes the safest place is not where they tell you to go." Madison's eyes widened, but before she could respond, her Secret Service escort appeared around the corner. "Madison, we need to move to your next class." As the agent led Madison away, the girl looked back over her shoulder, her expression a mixture of confusion and something that might have been recognition. She'd heard something in Maria's voice that didn't match the broken English and subservient demeanor. She'd heard the voice of someone who knew about danger, someone who understood how to survive. That evening, as Maria prepared to leave Oakwood, she noticed increased activity around the school. Additional security vehicles, more agents, and a level of coordination that spoke of major federal involvement. They were taking the threat seriously, which meant it was real. But it also meant that tomorrow, when they moved Madison to what they believed was safety, they might actually be delivering her directly into the hands of whoever was planning to take her. Maria sat in her car for several minutes, watching the school and the activity around it. 15 years ago, she had made choices that required her to disappear, to become someone else, to leave behind everything she had been. Tonight, she was facing the possibility that she might have to make those choices again. The difference was that this time, an innocent girl's life hung in the balance. And Samantha Cross had never been able to walk away from someone who needed protection, even when staying meant risking everything. As she drove home, Maria's phone buzzed with another message. "Delivery confirmed for tomorrow. Location change will be communicated." This time, she didn't delete the message. Instead, she forwarded it to a number she hadn't used in 15 years, along with a single word: compromised. The game had begun, and Maria Valdez was about to discover whether Samantha Cross still existed beneath 15 years of careful invisibility.
The response to Maria's message came at 3:17 a.m., jolting her awake in her small apartment. The phone displayed only a number she hadn't seen in over a decade, but the voice that answered when she called was achingly familiar. "Jesus Christ, Sam. We all thought you were dead." "I was supposed to be, Marcus," she replied, using a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. "But we have a problem." Colonel Marcus Webb, now working private security for high-level government contracts, listened as Maria quickly outlined the situation at Oakwood. When she finished, there was a long silence. "Sam, If you're right about this, we're talking about a coordinated operation against the president's daughter. The kind of thing that takes months of planning and inside information. Which is why moving her tomorrow is exactly the wrong play, Maria said. They're expecting it. Hell, they're probably counting on it. What do you need from me? Information. Who else knows about the planned move? What's the extraction route? And Marcus, she hesitated. I need to know if my cover is still solid or if someone's been digging. I'll make some calls. But Sam, if you're thinking about going operational again, I'm thinking about keeping a 17-year-old girl alive, Maria cut him off. Everything else is secondary. After ending the call, Maria spent the remaining hours before dawn reviewing everything she knew about Oakwood's security protocols and the surrounding area. If someone was planning to intercept Madison during the transfer, there were only 3 viable routes from the school to the nearest federal facility. Each one had vulnerabilities that a well-trained team could exploit. By the time she arrived at work, Maria had identified 17 different ways to ambush a federal convoy moving through suburban Virginia. The question was which one the kidnappers would choose. "Morning, Maria," Mr. Peterson greeted her, but his usual friendliness seemed strained. "Could I see you in my office for a minute?" The request sent alarm bells ringing in Maria's head, but she followed Peterson to the small maintenance office where Captain Pierce was waiting with a man she didn't recognize. The stranger wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Maria, this is Agent Derek Hayes from the Secret Service. He has some questions about your observations yesterday." Hayes studied Maria with the cold professionalism of a federal investigator. His eyes took in every detail of her appearance, from her worn sneakers to the way she held herself when nervous. "Ms. Valdez, Captain Pierce tells me that you noticed some unusual behavior from our repair crew yesterday." "Si, senor. They ask many questions, not about heating." "What kind of questions specifically?" Maria repeated the conversation, maintaining her nervous demeanor while carefully observing Hayes' reactions. The agent was good at hiding his thoughts, but she cut the slight tension around his eyes when she mentioned the crew's interest in student pickup procedures. "Ms. Valdez, how long have you been working in school maintenance?" 7 years, senor. Different schools, but always cleaning, always maintenance." "And before that?" "House cleaning, restaurant work. I come from Los Angeles 15 years ago, looking for better work." Hayes made notes on his tablet. "Do you have family in the area?" "No, senor. My husband, he died in an accident in L.A. No children. I work to survive." It was a carefully constructed backstory, with documentation that would hold up under normal scrutiny. But Hayes wasn't conducting normal scrutiny. His questions were probing for inconsistencies, testing whether Maria Valdez was really who she claimed to be. "Captain Pierce mentioned that you have particularly good observational skills. Where did you learn to notice the kinds of details you reported yesterday?" Maria shifted uncomfortably, as if embarrassed by the attention. "My neighborhood in L.A., like I tell Captain Pierce, you learn to watch for trouble, or trouble find you." "What neighborhood specifically?" "East L.A., near Whittier Boulevard. Very poor area. Much crime." Hayes typed rapidly on his tablet, probably cross-referencing her story with databases. Maria knew her cover would hold, but she also knew that too much scrutiny would eventually raise questions she couldn't answer. "Ms. Valdez, I need to ask you to be extra vigilant today. If you see anything unusual, anyone who doesn't belong, I want you to contact Captain Pierce immediately. Do you understand?" "Si, senor. I help however I can." As the meeting ended and Maria returned to her duties, she noticed the increased security presence throughout the school. Additional agents in poorly disguised civilian clothes, more sophisticated surveillance equipment, and a general atmosphere of controlled tension that spoke of major federal involvement. But she also noticed something else. The same heating repair truck from 3 days ago was back, parked in a different location with a clear view of the main entrance. During her break, Maria used the staff restroom to send a coded text to Marcus. "Watchers are being watched. Dance starts soon."
The response came within minutes. "Your cover shows stress fractures. Federal interest increasing. Recommend immediate extraction." Maria stared at the message, then deleted it. Extraction meant abandoning Madison to whatever was coming. It meant returning to the shadows while an innocent girl faced dangers she couldn't even imagine. Instead, she typed back, "Negative, staying for the dance." As lunch period began, Maria positioned herself near the administrative offices, where she could monitor communications. What she overheard confirmed her worst fears. "The extraction is moved up," Agent Hayes was telling Pierce. "We're taking Madison out during lunch instead of first period tomorrow. The threat assessment has been upgraded." "What changed?" Pierce asked. "Multiple intelligence sources are reporting movement: phone chatter, financial transfers, personnel relocations. Whatever's planned is happening soon." "What about the school? Do we evacuate everyone else?" "Negative. We don't want to signal that we're aware of the threat. Madison's extraction will look routine until she's safely in federal custody." Maria felt her pulse quicken. They were walking into exactly the trap she'd feared. By moving Madison during an unexpected time frame, they thought they were being clever. But if the kidnappers had inside information about security protocols, they would be ready for exactly this kind of change. Her phone buzzed with another message, this one from the unknown number that had started everything. "Package pickup confirmed for lunch period. New schedule accommodated." The kidnappers knew about the change, which meant someone in that room with Hayes and Pierce was feeding them information. Maria made a decision that would have horrified her handlers from 15 years ago. She was going to break cover. Moving quickly through the hallways, Maria found Madison at her locker, gathering books for her afternoon classes. The Secret Service escort was momentarily distracted by a group of students horsing around nearby. "Señorita," Maria said quietly, approaching with her cleaning cart, "you drop this." She handed Madison a folded piece of paper that looked like homework, but contained a message written in careful block letters. "They are moving you during lunch. It's a trap. When I signal, run to janitor's closet B12. Trust no one else." Madison's eyes widened as she read, but to her credit, she didn't panic. Instead, she looked directly at Maria and nodded almost imperceptibly. "Thank you," Madison said softly, and Maria heard something in her voice that confirmed what she'd suspected. The president's daughter was intelligent, observant, and stronger than anyone gave her credit for. As Maria moved away, she caught sight of Agent Hayes watching from down the hallway. His expression was thoughtful, suspicious, and increasingly focused on the cleaning lady who seemed to be in all the right places at all the wrong times. The endgame was approaching, and Maria could feel the weight of 15 years of careful invisibility beginning to crack under the pressure. Soon, very soon, she would have to choose between maintaining her cover and saving Madison's life. And for Samantha Cross, that wasn't really a choice at all. The hunt was about to begin, and this time, the prey was going to fight back.
The lunch period at Oakwood Preparatory began like any other, with students streaming toward the cafeteria and common areas. But beneath the surface normalcy, Maria could feel the electric tension of an operation about to unfold. She positioned herself near the main corridor, ostensibly cleaning windows while maintaining visual contact with both Madison and the increased security presence. Agent Hayes had positioned additional personnel throughout the school, their attempts at blending in obvious to anyone with tactical training. Maria counted at least 8 federal agents, plus Madison's regular protective detail, all preparing for what they believed would be a routine extraction. What they didn't know was that they were being watched by professionals who had turned surveillance into an art form. Maria's encrypted phone buzzed. "Cleaning crew arriving, standard service entrance, maintain schedule." She looked toward the service entrance and saw a van pulling up with Metropolitan Maintenance Services painted on the side. 3 men in work uniforms emerged, carrying industrial cleaning equipment that looked legitimate but moved with the synchronized precision of a tactical team. Her blood ran cold. The kidnappers weren't planning to intercept Madison during transport. They were coming into the school. Moving quickly, Maria activated an emergency protocol she'd hoped never to use. She pulled the fire alarm in the main hallway, sending a piercing wail throughout the building. Students began filing out in orderly confusion, while teachers and staff implemented standard evacuation procedures. But the federal agents didn't evacuate. Instead, they moved immediately to secure Madison, recognizing that the alarm might be connected to the threat they'd been anticipating. Agent Hayes spoke rapidly into his radio.
Falcon 1, we have an unscheduled evacuation, moving to extract package immediately. Maria watched as Hayes' team surrounded Madison, preparing to escort her toward the main exit where their vehicles waited. It was exactly what the kidnappers were expecting. The fake maintenance crew had disappeared into the building during the confusion of the evacuation, using the chaos to mask their infiltration. Maria spotted one of them moving through the emptying hallways with equipment that definitely wasn't for cleaning. She made a split-second decision that would blow her cover completely. "Agent Hayes," she called out, abandoning her accent and speaking with the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. "You're walking into an ambush." Hayes spun around, his weapon already in his hand. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's been watching this school a lot longer than you have," Maria replied, her posture and demeanor completely transformed. "There are at least 3 hostiles inside the building and your extraction route is compromised." "How do you know that?" Before Maria could answer, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting the hallways in an eerie red glow. Somewhere in the building, someone had cut the main power, leaving only the backup systems operational. "Because this is exactly how I would do it," Maria said grimly. The next 30 seconds unfolded with devastating precision. The kidnappers had planned their operation perfectly, using the confusion of the fire alarm and power outage to create exactly the kind of chaos that made their job easier. Hayes' team found themselves caught between multiple threats, with Madison in the center of a coordinated attack that seemed to anticipate their every move. Smoke grenades filled the corridor, reducing visibility to almost zero. Flashbang grenades created disorienting explosions of light and sound. And through it all, the kidnappers moved with the kind of tactical precision that spoke of extensive planning and professional training. Maria grabbed Madison's arm as the girl stood frozen in the chaos. "B12, she whispered urgently. "Now." They moved through the smoke and confusion, Maria using her intimate knowledge of the school's layout to navigate the darkened hallways. Behind them, she could hear gunfire as Hayes' team engaged the attackers. Janitor's closet B12 was located in a section of the building that most people never visited, away from the main corridors and classrooms. Maria had chosen it specifically because it offered multiple exit routes and wasn't on any standard building schematics that the kidnappers might have obtained. "Who are you?" Madison demanded as they reached the closet. "And don't tell me you're just a cleaning lady." "Someone who's going to keep you alive," Maria replied, checking her phone for messages from Marcus. "But we need to move fast. They'll figure out where we've gone soon enough." "The Secret Service agents?" "Are outnumbered and outgunned by people who knew exactly when and how you were being moved," Maria cut her off. "This operation was planned by professionals with inside information." Madison's face paled. "You're saying someone betrayed us?" "I'm saying someone has been feeding your movements to people who want to hurt you, and right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and them."
Maria's phone lit up with a message from Marcus. Federal response teams en route. ETA 12 minutes. Building surrounded, but infiltration complete. 12 minutes. They had to survive for 12 minutes against a team that had spent months planning this operation. "Listen to me carefully," Maria said to Madison. "I need you to trust me completely, even if what I ask doesn't make sense. Can you do that?" Madison studied Maria's face, seeing something there that hadn't been visible when she was playing the role of a subservient cleaning lady. "You're military, aren't you? Special forces?" "Was. A long time ago. Now I'm just someone who couldn't walk away from a kid who needed help." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hallway outside. The kidnappers had regrouped and were conducting a systematic search of the building. "They'll check this closet eventually," Madison said. "I know. Which is why we're not staying here." Maria opened a maintenance panel in the back wall of the closet, revealing a service tunnel that connected to the building's utility systems. It was cramped, dirty, and definitely not designed for human passage, but it would get them to a different part of the building without being detected. "You're gotta be kidding," Madison said, looking at the narrow opening. "Would you rather crawl through a tunnel or get kidnapped by professionals who kill people for a living?" Madison didn't hesitate. She squeezed through the opening, followed by Maria, who sealed the panel behind them. As they crawled through the cramped service tunnel, Maria could hear the sounds of the search continuing above them. voices, footsteps, and the occasional burst of radio chatter as the kidnappers coordinated their efforts. "Where does this lead?" Madison whispered. "Building maintenance room in the basement. From there, we can access the old storm drain system that connects to the municipal tunnels." "How do you know all this?" Maria was quiet for a moment. "Because I've spent 8 months mapping every inch of this place, planning for exactly this kind of situation." "You knew this was going to happen?" "I knew something was going to happen. Your father has enemies, Madison, the kind of people who see hurting you as a way to hurt him. I've been watching for threats since the day I started working here." They reached the end of the tunnel and emerged into the basement maintenance room. The space was filled with boilers, electrical panels, and the mechanical systems that kept the school running. More importantly, it was far from the main search area. Maria checked her phone. 8 minutes until backup arrived. "Now what?" Madison asked. Before Maria could answer, her phone buzzed with a new message that made her blood freeze. "Package located. Extraction in progress. Cleanup crew dispatched." They'd been found. And a cleanup crew meant the kidnappers were preparing to eliminate witnesses. "Change of plans," Maria said grimly. "We're not hiding anymore. We're fighting back." For the first time in 15 years, Samantha Cross was about to go operational, and this time she was fighting for more than just a mission objective. She was fighting for an innocent girl's life.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In the basement maintenance room, surrounded by the mechanical heartbeat of Oakwood Preparatory, Maria Valdez ceased to exist. The transformation was subtle but complete. Her posture straightened, her movements became economical and precise, and her eyes took on the cold calculation of a professional operator who had spent years in the world's most dangerous places. Madison watched in fascination as the humble cleaning lady she'd known for months revealed herself to be something entirely different. "Who are you, really?" "My name is Samantha Cross," Maria replied, checking the exits and assessing their tactical situation. 15 years ago, I was a Delta Force operator specializing in hostage rescue and high-value target extraction. Officially, I died during Operation Ghost Watch in Afghanistan." "But you didn't die." "No, but the mission went sideways in ways that required me to disappear. The Army needed someone to blame for the political fallout, and I needed to vanish before certain people decided I knew too much." Samantha moved to a wall-mounted tool cabinet, her fingers finding hidden latches that revealed a concealed compartment. Inside were items that definitely didn't belong to a school janitor: tactical radio, encrypted satellite phone, medical supplies, and 2 military-grade sidearms with extra ammunition. Madison's eyes widened. "You've been planning for this." "I've been planning for something like this since the day I took this job," Samantha confirmed, checking the weapons with practiced efficiency. "Your father made a lot of enemies during his political career. I've been monitoring threat assessments, tracking unusual activity, and preparing for the day someone decided to come after you." "The government sent you to protect me?" Samantha's laugh was bitter. "The government thinks I'm dead, remember? This is personal. I couldn't stand by and watch an innocent kid get hurt when I had the skills to prevent it." Her encrypted phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. "Building compromised, hostile count minimum 6, maximum 10, federal response delayed by roadblocks, you're on your own for 15 minutes. 15 minutes, against a professional extraction team that had been planning this operation for months. "Samantha," Madison said quietly, "what happened 15 years ago? Why did you have to disappear?" For a moment, Samantha's professional mask slipped, revealing the pain of old wounds. "We were sent to rescue a group of American civilians being held by terrorists in a compound outside Kabul. Intelligence said there were 12 hostages and maybe 20 hostiles." She secured the radio to her belt and checked the tactical vest she had retrieved from the hidden compartment. "When we got there, we found 43 hostages, including women and children, and the compound was defended by over 100 fighters with heavy weapons." "What did you do?" "What I was trained to do. I adapted the mission parameters to save as many lives as possible. We got 38 people out alive, including a senator's daughter and the children of 3 ambassadors." Madison could hear the weight of memory in Samantha's voice. "But something went wrong."
The compound was supposed to be hit by an airstrike after we extracted the hostages, clean up any remaining threats, destroy any intelligence materials. Except the strike happened while we were still evacuating people. They bombed the compound while you were inside? Samantha nodded grimly. Someone decided that the potential intelligence value of the site was worth more than the lives of the rescue team. My entire squad was killed. I survived because I was in a separate building, but officially, we all died in the airstrike. Jesus. When I made it back to base, I was told that the mission had been a complete success and that all personnel had been accounted for. When I tried to report what actually happened, I was informed that my version of events would be considered classified and that discussing them would be treason. You decided to disappear.
They're professionals, she said to Madison. Military trained, well-equipped, and they've planned this operation down to the minute. But they made one mistake. What's that? They assumed I was just a cleaning lady. Samantha checked her weapons one final time, then turned to Madison with the kind of focused intensity that made it clear she was shifting into combat mode. Listen carefully. I'm going to get you out of here, but you need to follow my instructions exactly. No questions, no hesitation. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Because in about 30 seconds, I'm going to start a war in the hallways above us, and our only chance of survival is if you trust me completely. The footsteps were getting closer, and Samantha could hear voices coordinating the search. Professional voices, speaking with the clipped efficiency of people who killed for a living. Her phone buzzed with one final message. Target acquired, basement level, converging on maintenance sector, eliminate all witnesses. Samantha looked at the message, then at Madison, and made a decision that would have been familiar to anyone who had served with her 15 years ago. She was going to hold the line, no matter the cost. Madison, she said quietly, I need you to know something. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, you're going to be okay. I promise you that. What about you? Samantha's smile was grim but determined. I've been dead for 15 years. Now I get to find out what it feels like to be alive again. She moved toward the maintenance room's main entrance, weapons ready, her mind already calculating fields of fire and tactical advantages. Behind her, Madison crouched near the emergency exit, ready to run if things went badly. The door at the top of the stairs exploded inward as the kidnappers breached the basement level. Tactical lights cut through the darkness, followed by armed figures moving with professional precision. They were expecting to find a frightened girl and a helpless cleaning lady. Instead, they found Samantha Cross. And for the first time in 15 years, the ghost of Operation Ghostwatch was about to remind the world why she had been one of the most feared operators in the entire Delta Force arsenal. The hunt was over. The war was about to begin.
The first kidnapper through the basement door moved with the confidence of someone who expected to find easy targets. Instead, he found himself staring down the barrel of Samantha Cross's weapon as she emerged from behind a massive boiler unit with the fluid precision of a predator who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Wrong turn," she said quietly, and pulled the trigger. The suppressed gunshot was barely audible over the mechanical noise of the building's systems, but the effect was immediate. The lead kidnapper dropped silently, his tactical radio clattering across the concrete floor. His partner, following close behind, had just enough time to register what had happened before Samantha put 2 rounds center mass, dropping him beside his teammate. But these weren't amateurs. Even as their point men fell, the remaining kidnappers adapted with professional speed. Smoke grenades rolled down the stairs, filling the basement with thick gray clouds that reduced visibility to almost zero. Thermal imaging devices would cut through the smoke, giving them a significant advantage in the confined space. Except Samantha knew this building better than they did. "Madison, emergency exit now," she commanded, laying down covering fire as more figures appeared at the top of the stairs. The teenager didn't hesitate, moving toward the basement's external exit, while Samantha used the building's infrastructure as cover. Steam pipes, electrical conduits, and massive HVAC units created a maze of obstacles that favored someone who knew the layout.
Samantha moved through the mechanical forest with silent efficiency, using the ambient noise to mask her position while the kidnappers tried to navigate unfamiliar terrain. Her tactical radio crackled with an encrypted transmission. Ghost Watch, this is Overwatch. Federal response teams have been delayed by coordinated roadblocks throughout the area. You are weapons-free and cleared for all necessary action. Marcus had managed to reach her through the jamming, which meant he was using military-grade communication equipment. It also meant that someone very high up the food chain had authorized her to engage hostile forces on American soil. Copy, Overwatch. Multiple hostiles neutralized. Packages mobile and secure. Be advised, Ghost Watch. Initial intelligence was incorrect. Hostile count is now estimated at 12 to 15 operatives. This is a much larger operation than anticipated. Samantha processed this information while reloading her weapon. 12 to 15 operators meant this wasn't just a kidnapping attempt. It was a full-scale military operation disguised as a crime. Someone had invested serious resources in taking Madison Garrett. A thermal laser sight cut through the smoke, searching for targets. Samantha dropped below the beam and moved to a new position, using a massive water heater as cover. The kidnapper wielding the thermal scope was good, but he was hunting someone who had spent years being hunted by the best in the world. She flanked wide, coming up behind the operative's position and eliminating him with a single shot before he could alert his teammates. His thermal device clattered to the floor, giving her a momentary advantage. "Bravo 2 is down," came a voice over the kidnapper's radio frequency. "Target is armed and extremely dangerous. This is not a civilian." "Copy that. Implement Protocol 7, full tactical response authorized." Protocol 7. Samantha recognized the terminology from her Delta Force days. It meant the kidnappers had abandoned any pretense of keeping her alive. They were switching from capture to elimination, which meant they viewed her as enough of a threat to risk killing a potential witness. It also meant that they were about to get serious. The next wave came down the stairs with overwhelming firepower. Automatic weapons fire shredded the air where Samantha had been positioned, chewing through metal pipes and concrete with devastating efficiency. But she was no longer there, having used the building's service tunnels to reposition behind their advance. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse in the confined space of the basement. The kidnappers had superior numbers and firepower, but Samantha had home field advantage and 15 years of experience staying alive when outnumbered. She picked them off one by one, using their unfamiliarity with the building against them. A loose steam pipe became a scalding distraction. A strategically placed shot into an electrical panel plunged sections of the basement into darkness. Every piece of infrastructure became a weapon in the hands of someone who understood both building systems and combat tactics. "Madison, status report," she called out over her radio. "I'm at the emergency exit, but there are men outside. At least 3 that I can see." Samantha cursed silently. The kidnappers had positioned Overwatch teams around the building's exits, turning their escape routes into kill zones. They'd planned this operation with military precision, anticipating multiple contingencies. "Stay put. Do not exit until I give you the all clear."
Another wave of gunfire forced Samantha to take cover behind a massive boiler unit. The kidnappers were getting frustrated, and frustrated operators made mistakes. She counted muzzle flashes, listening to their radio chatter, and building a mental map of their positions. "Alpha Team, we need to end this. Federal response teams will be here soon." "Copy. Implementing thermal charges. Bring the whole basement down if necessary." Thermal charges meant they were willing to collapse the building to eliminate her. These weren't just professional kidnappers. They were operatives with access to military-grade explosives and the authorization to use them on American soil. Samantha's mind raced through tactical options, the building's structural supports, the proximity of gas lines, the potential for catastrophic damage that would kill not just her and Madison, but potentially hundreds of people in the surrounding area. She activated her radio to Marcus. "Overwatch, hostiles are implementing building demolition. I need immediate federal intervention or we're looking at mass casualties." "Ghostwatch, be advised that federal teams are moving to your location, but they're still 8 minutes out. Can you hold that long?" 8 minutes against a team that was about to bring down the building? Negative on holding position. I'm going mobile, switching to Protocol Omega. There was silence on the radio. Protocol Omega was a Delta Force term that meant abandoning defensive positions and going on the offensive against superior numbers. It was usually a suicide mission. Ghostwatch, confirm your last transmission. Confirmed, Overwatch. If they want a war, they're going to get one. Samantha gathered her remaining ammunition and moved toward the stairwell where the kidnappers were setting their charges. Madison's life depended on stopping them before they could bring down the building, and that meant abandoning the safety of defensive positions. For 15 years, she had hidden in the shadows, avoiding confrontation and keeping her skills buried beneath the facade of ordinary life. But some situations required extraordinary responses, and some people were worth dying for. As she moved toward the sound of approaching explosives, Samantha Cross felt something she hadn't experienced in over a decade: the cold, focused clarity of a Delta Force operator who had accepted that survival was less important than completing the mission. The basement was about to become a battlefield, and this time, she wasn't hiding anymore.
Protocol Omega had always been theoretical in Samantha's Delta Force training, a last resort tactical doctrine reserved for situations where defensive positions had become untenable, and the only option was to take the fight directly to the enemy. She had never expected to implement it in the basement of a prep school, but 15 years of hiding had taught her that life rarely followed the manual. The thermal charges the kidnappers were setting would bring down not just the basement, but potentially the entire west wing of Oakwood Preparatory. The resulting collapse would bury any evidence of the operation while eliminating witnesses, but it would also kill Madison and potentially dozens of other people who might still be in the building. That made this personal. Samantha moved through the smoke-filled basement with predatory silence, using the building's mechanical systems as cover while she closed distance on the demolitions team. The kidnappers were professional, but they were operating in her territory now, and she had spent 8 months turning this building into a tactical advantage. "Charlie team, placement complete on support beam 7, came a voice over their radio frequency. "Initiating timer sequence." "Copy, Charlie team. Alpha team, what's your status on the primary target?" "Still mobile. Target is demonstrating advanced tactical capabilities. Recommend immediate extraction once demolition is complete." They were talking about Madison as if she were a package to be retrieved from a warehouse fire. The casual professionalism of it, the reduction of a 17-year-old girl's life to operational parameters, triggered something dark and dangerous in Samantha's chest. She emerged from behind a massive air conditioning unit directly behind the demolition specialist, her suppressed weapon pressed against the base of his skull before he could react. "Timer sequence," she whispered. "How long?" The operative's hand moved toward his sidearm, and Samantha increased pressure on the trigger. "That would be a mistake." "How long?" 60 seconds, he replied through gritted teeth. "Disable it." "I can't. The charges are networked. Disabling requires command authorization." Samantha's mind raced through options. 60 seconds to find and neutralize multiple thermal charges placed throughout the basement's structural supports. Even if she could locate them all, she didn't have the technical expertise to disarm military-grade explosives. But she did have something else. "Madison," she called over her radio, "I need you to listen very carefully. In 50 seconds, this building is going to experience a major structural event. When I give you the signal, you need to run toward the main parking lot as fast as you can. Don't stop, don't look back, just run." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But sometimes protecting people meant making choices that couldn't be explained or justified, only executed. Samantha neutralized the demolition specialist with efficient brutality, then stripped him of his radio and explosive vest. The remaining kidnappers would be converging on her position soon, drawn by the sudden silence from their teammate. "Overwatch, this is Ghostwatch. Building demolition imminent. I'm implementing emergency extraction for the package." "Ghostwatch, federal teams are 4 minutes out. Can you delay detonation?" "Negative. Going to plan B." "There is no plan B in the manual."
Samantha smiled grimly as she moved toward the basement's central support column, where the largest thermal charge had been placed. The thermal charge attached to the central support beam was designed to bring down the building in a controlled collapse that would bury the basement completely. But controlled demolitions relied on precise timing and structural calculations. If she could disrupt the sequence, not disarm it, but alter it, she might be able to create a survivable outcome. Alpha Team, Charlie Team, converge on Basement Central. We have a problem. The remaining kidnappers were moving toward her position with desperate urgency. They knew that if the building came down with federal agents still approaching, it would create exactly the kind of investigation they were trying to avoid. Samantha used the stolen radio to monitor their movements while she worked on the central charge. She couldn't disarm it, but she could redirect it. The building's structural plans, which she'd memorized during her months of preparation, showed a series of utility tunnels that ran beneath the basement level. If she could channel the explosion downward instead of upward... 20 seconds to detonation, came a voice over the kidnapper's radio. Emergency extraction. Mission parameters have changed. They were abandoning the operation, which meant they'd rather lose Madison than risk exposure when federal agents arrived to investigate a collapsed building.
Samantha attached the demolition specialist's remaining charges to the utility access panel directly below the central support beam. It wouldn't prevent the explosion, but it might redirect enough of the force downward to prevent total structural collapse. Madison, run! Now! Over her radio, she could hear the teenager moving toward the emergency exit, footsteps echoing through the concrete corridors above. The external Overwatch teams would try to intercept her, but Samantha had to trust that Madison was smart enough and fast enough to evade capture until federal backup arrived. 10 seconds to detonation. Samantha dove behind the massive boiler unit that had provided her cover throughout the firefight, wrapping herself in a canvas tarp she'd pulled from the maintenance supplies. The basement filled with the sound of tactical teams evacuating at high speed, their professional discipline overriding any desire to complete their primary mission. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The world exploded in fire and thunder. The basement floor bucked upward like a living thing, concrete and steel screaming as structural supports failed in sequence. Water pipes burst, electrical systems sparked and died, and the building's mechanical systems shut down in cascading failure. But the building didn't collapse. Samantha's improvised redirection had worked partially, channeling enough explosive force downward to prevent total structural failure. The basement was destroyed, but the floors above remained intact. As dust and debris settled around her, Samantha checked herself for injuries, cuts, bruises, and a ringing in her ears that would take days to clear, but nothing that would prevent her from moving. She activated her radio with shaking hands. Overwatch, this is Ghostwatch. Package status. The response came through heavy static. Package is secure. Federal teams have her in custody. What's your status? Samantha looked around at the devastation surrounding her. The basement looked like a war zone, with concrete rubble, twisted metal, and the bodies of the kidnappers who hadn't evacuated in time. Ghostwatch is operational, but I think my cover is blown. Through the destruction, she could hear voices calling from above. Federal agents, search and rescue teams, and the controlled chaos of an official response to what would be classified as a terrorist attack on American soil. After 15 years of invisibility, Samantha Cross was about to become very visible indeed. But Madison Garrett was alive, and that was the only metric that mattered. The mission was complete. Now came the much harder part, explaining to the federal government why a dead Delta Force operator had just saved the president's daughter.
The sound of boots on concrete echoed through the destroyed basement as federal agents made their way through the rubble towards Samantha's position. She remained behind the boiler unit, hands visible and weapons safely distant, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether she spent the rest of her life in federal custody or returned to the shadows she'd called home for 15 years. Federal agents, identify yourself!
Samantha Cross, former Delta Force, currently unarmed, she called back, her voice carrying the automatic authority of someone accustomed to high-stress situations. I'm coming out with my hands visible. She emerged from her cover slowly, noting the tactical formation of the agents surrounding her. These weren't the same agents who had been assigned to Madison's protection detail. These were federal response specialists, probably FBI's hostage rescue team, armed and equipped for exactly this kind of situation. Agent Hayes, I presume Ms. Valdez? Or should I say Ms. Cross? Either works, Samantha replied, keeping her hands visible, though I suspect Maria Valdez just died in this basement along with everything else. What happened here? Samantha gestured toward the bodies of the kidnappers scattered throughout the destroyed space. Professional extraction team, military trained, with access to advanced explosives and inside information about Madison's protection protocols. They came to take the president's daughter, and they were willing to bring down the building to cover their tracks. Hayes studied the technical aftermath with the eye of someone who understood combat operations. And you stopped them? I delayed them long enough for your people to secure Madison. The demolition charges were already set when I engaged. My options were limited. More federal agents were arriving, along with bomb disposal specialists and forensic teams who would spend the next several days cataloging every piece of evidence in the destroyed basement. Samantha noted the professional efficiency of their response and realized that someone very high up the chain of command had authorized a major federal investigation. Agent Hayes, came a voice over his radio. We need you topside. The package is requesting to speak with the janitor. Hayes looked at Samantha with renewed interest. The president's daughter is asking for you specifically? That's interesting considering you're supposed to be just a maintenance worker. People see what they need to see until they need to see something else. As they made their way through the rubble toward the basement stairs, Hayes continued his questioning. Ms. Cross, I'm going to need a full explanation of how a dead Delta Force operator ended up working as a school janitor at the same institution where the president's daughter happened to be targeted for kidnapping. Long story. I've got time. But before Samantha could respond, her encrypted phone buzzed with a priority message from Marcus. Federal debrief imminent. Legal team standing by. Presidential authorization obtained for full disclosure. You're cleared to tell them everything. Everything. After 15 years of carefully constructed lies and manufactured identities, she was being authorized to tell the truth. The question was whether the truth would set her free or bury her deeper than any basement explosion ever could. They emerged into the main level of Oakwood Preparatory to find a scene that looked like the aftermath of a military operation. Federal agents, local police, emergency medical teams, and media personnel cordoned off behind security barriers. The school had been transformed into the center of what would undoubtedly become a major federal investigation. Madison Garrett sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in an emergency blanket, but alert and apparently uninjured. When she saw Samantha emerging from the basement, she immediately stood and walked toward them, despite the protests of her medical attendant. You're alive, Madison said, and Samantha could hear genuine relief in her voice. Harder to kill than I look, Samantha replied with a slight smile. I need to know, Madison said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Samantha could hear. Were you assigned to protect me, or did you choose to? It was exactly the kind of question Samantha had hoped to avoid, but looking into the intelligent eyes of the 17-year-old who had just survived a professional kidnapping attempt, she realized that Madison deserved the truth. I chose to, she said simply. No one assigned me, no one ordered me, and no one authorized me to care about what happened to you. But sometimes, that's the only choice that matters. Madison nodded slowly, as if the answer confirmed something she had already suspected. Thank you. Before Samantha could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the school's main entrance, and Director Michael Reeves of the Secret Service stepped out, accompanied by several officials whose bearings suggested they were much higher up the federal food chain than the agents already on scene.
Miss Cross, Director Reeves called out as he approached. We need to talk. Agent Hayes looked between Samantha and the director with growing confusion. Sir, you know this individual? Agent Hayes, meet Samantha Cross, former Delta Force operator and currently one of the most classified individuals in the federal database. Miss Cross, you've caused quite a stir in Washington over the past few hours. I imagine I have, Samantha replied carefully. Director Reeves gestured toward the SUV. The president would like to speak with you personally. He's very interested in understanding how someone who officially died 15 years ago managed to save his daughter's life. The weight of that statement settled over the assembled agents like a physical force. The President of the United States wanted to personally debrief a dead woman who had just prevented the kidnapping of his daughter. This was about to become much bigger than a simple federal investigation. "Am I under arrest?" Samantha asked. "That depends entirely on what you tell us during the next few hours. But I can say that the preliminary assessment is that you acted heroically under impossible circumstances to protect an innocent civilian. That carries significant weight in our evaluation." Madison stepped forward. "Director Reeves, I need to be clear about something. This woman saved my life. Whatever protocols she violated, whatever rules she broke, she did it to protect me when the official security measures failed." "Noted, Ms. Garrett. But there are larger questions at play here. Questions about how a classified military operation from 15 years ago connects to today's events, and whether there are additional threats we need to be aware of." Samantha looked around at the faces watching her: federal agents, local police, emergency personnel, and Madison herself. After 15 years of invisibility, she was about to become the center of attention at the highest levels of government. But for the first time since Operation Ghostwatch, she wasn't afraid of the scrutiny. She had saved an innocent life, and whatever consequences followed, that single fact would remain true. "Director Reeves," she said firmly, "I'm ready to tell you everything. But I want legal immunity for Madison and any other civilians who might be affected by what I have to say." "Granted. Now let's go have a conversation with the president about how dead soldiers come back to life when the country needs them most." As Samantha walked toward the SUV that would take her to the most important debriefing of her life, she caught sight of Madison watching from beside the ambulance. The girl raised her hand in a small wave, and Samantha nodded in return. Mission accomplished. Now came the much more complicated task of rebuilding a life that had been buried for 15 years.
The Oval Office had never felt smaller to Samantha Cross than it did at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours after the explosion that had ended her 15 years of carefully maintained invisibility. President Jonathan Pierce sat behind the resolute desk, flanked by Director Reeves, National Security Advisor Patricia Coleman, and a woman Samantha didn't recognize but whose bearing suggested intelligence community leadership. "Ms. Cross," the president began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just learned his daughter's life had hung by threads he hadn't even known existed. "I understand I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." "You owe me nothing, Mr. President. Madison is safe. That's all that matters." President Pierce studied her face with the kind of intensity that had made him successful in both business and politics. "But it's not all that matters, is it? Because according to the preliminary reports I've received, today's attack was made possible by intelligence that could only have come from inside the federal government." The woman Samantha didn't recognize leaned forward. "Ms. Cross, I'm Deputy Director Sarah Montgomery, CIA. We've been investigating the intelligence leak that made today's operation possible, and we believe it connects directly to the operation that officially killed you 15 years ago." Samantha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Operation Ghostwatch. Exactly. The same Pentagon officials who authorized the airstrike that killed your Delta Force team have been involved in a conspiracy to sell classified information to foreign intelligence services. Today's kidnapping attempt was part of a larger operation designed to destabilize the administration. Director Reeves opened a classified folder and slid several photographs across the coffee table toward Samantha. "Do you recognize any of these individuals?" The faces staring back at her were older, more distinguished, but unmistakable. Colonel Marcus Webb, not her Marcus, but the Pentagon intelligence officer who had ordered the airstrike that killed her team. General Patricia Hayes, who had threatened her with court-martial when she tried to report what really happened,
and Deputy Secretary of Defense Richard Coleman, who had offered her the choice between a new identity and federal prison. "They're all still in government?" Samantha asked incredulously. "Not anymore," President Pierce said grimly. "As of 6 hours ago, they're all under federal arrest for treason, conspiracy, and accessory to kidnapping. The investigation into their activities has been ongoing for 2 years, but we needed concrete evidence of their willingness to harm American citizens." "You used Madison as bait," Samantha said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "We used Madison's existing security vulnerabilities to expose a conspiracy that threatened national security," National Security Advisor Coleman corrected. "But we had no idea the attempt would be this sophisticated or this violent. Without your intervention, we would have lost both Madison and any chance of prosecuting the conspirators." Samantha stood and walked to the windows overlooking the rose garden, her mind processing the implications of what she'd just learned. So the last 15 years, the exile, the new identity, all of it was to keep me alive long enough to provide evidence against these people? "Not exactly," Deputy Director Montgomery said. "The exile was real. The threat to your life was real. But over time, certain people in the intelligence community began to realize that you represented our best chance of exposing a conspiracy that went to the highest levels of government." President Pierce joined Samantha at the window. "Ms. Cross, I'm going to be direct with you. We know you've spent 15 years using false identities to work security jobs at sensitive installations around the country. We know you've prevented at least 6 terrorist attacks and saved countless lives, all while maintaining complete deniability for the government. You've been watching me. We've been protecting you while you protected others. But today changed everything. Your actions saved my daughter, but they also exposed you completely, which means we need to have a conversation about your future." Samantha turned to face the assembled officials. "What kind of conversation?" Director Reeves spoke up. "The kind where we officially resurrect Samantha Cross and offer her a position that recognizes her unique skills and experience." "What position?" "Special Advisor to the President for Unconventional Threats," National Security Advisor Coleman said. "You would report directly to the President and have authority to investigate and respond to threats that fall outside normal channels." "A ghost position for a ghost operator," Deputy Director Montgomery added. "You would have access to resources, legal protection, and official authorization to do what you've been doing unofficially for 15 years. Samantha was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer. "And if I decline?"
Then Samantha Cross officially remains dead, and you're free to return to whatever life you choose, President Pierce said. "But I hope you won't, because what happened today proves that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from the people we trust most. And sometimes the only defense against that is someone who exists outside the normal system." "What about Madison? Is she safe now?" "The immediate threat has been neutralized," Director Reeves confirmed. "But there may be other conspirators we haven't identified yet. Having someone with your capabilities officially available to protect her and other high-value targets would be reassuring." President Pierce returned to his desk and picked up a leather folder. "Ms. Cross, this contains a presidential pardon for any actions you may have taken during Operation Ghostwatch, official recognition of your service to the country over the past 15 years, and authorization to act with full federal authority in matters of national security." He extended the folder toward her. "The question is, are you ready to come back from the dead officially?" Samantha looked at the folder, then at the faces watching her expectantly. For 15 years, she had existed in the spaces between official recognition and total invisibility, helping people who needed protection while avoiding the attention that could get her killed. Now she was being offered something she had never thought possible: the chance to do the same work with official sanction and legal protection. But more than that, she was being offered the chance to honor the memory of her Delta Force teammates who had died in that compound in Afghanistan, killed by the same people who had threatened Madison today. Mr. President, she said, taking the folder, Samantha Cross reports for duty. As she signed the documents that would officially restore her identity and authorize her new position, Samantha felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years, the sense that she was exactly where she belonged. The ghost had come home, and for the first time since Operation Ghost Watch, she wasn't afraid of being seen. Outside the Oval Office windows, dawn was breaking over Washington, D.C., and somewhere in the city, Madison Pierce was sleeping safely in her bed, protected by people who understood that sometimes the best guardian angels are the ones who've learned to fly in the dark. The mission was complete. But for Samantha Cross, officially alive again after 15 years of being dead, the real work was just beginning.
6 months after the attack at Oakwood Preparatory, the East Room of the White House filled with an unprecedented gathering of military officials, intelligence personnel, and dignitaries who had come to witness something that had never happened before in American history: the official resurrection of a soldier who had been declared dead in service to her country. Samantha Cross stood at attention in her dress uniform, the ribbons and medals she had earned 15 years ago restored to their proper place, alongside new commendations that recognized her unofficial service during the years she had been erased from existence. The Silver Star, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and a new medal that had been created specifically for her, the Presidential Medal for Extraordinary Service in Defense of Democracy. President Pierce stepped to the podium, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd with the gravity of someone who understood the historical significance of the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to correct an injustice that has persisted for 15 years and to honor a woman whose service to this nation exemplifies the highest ideals of courage, sacrifice, and dedication to protecting the innocent. In the audience, Madison Pierce sat with her mother, now 18 and about to start her freshman year at Stanford University. She had requested to be present for the ceremony, insisting that she owed her life to the woman being honored. Beside her sat Marcus Webb, the real Marcus Webb, Samantha's former colleague who had helped coordinate her protection during the years she had been officially dead. 15 years ago, Captain Samantha Cross led a Delta Force operation that saved the lives of 38 American civilians being held hostage by terrorists in Afghanistan. The operation was successful, but political considerations required that its details remain classified, and Captain Cross was officially listed as killed in action to protect both her life and the integrity of ongoing operations. President Pierce paused, looking directly at Samantha. What the official records did not show was that Captain Cross spent the next 15 years continuing to serve her country in ways that required her to remain invisible, using her extraordinary skills to prevent terrorist attacks, protect innocent civilians, and gather intelligence on threats to national security. The audience was silent, recognizing that they were witnessing the revelation of one of the most classified operations in American intelligence history. 6 months ago, when my daughter was targeted for kidnapping by a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government, it was Captain Cross, working under the assumed identity of a school janitor, who recognized the threat, neutralized the attackers, and saved not only Madison's life, but the lives of everyone in the building. Director Reeves stepped forward with a leather-bound certificate. By order of the President of the United States, and with the unanimous approval of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Captain Samantha Cross is hereby promoted to the rank of Colonel and appointed as the first Director of the Office of Unconventional Threats, with full authority to investigate and respond to threats that fall outside normal channels of government response. As the audience applauded, Samantha felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she had carried for 15 years. The constant vigilance, the careful maintenance of false identities, the isolation of living as someone who didn't officially exist, all of it was finally over. But more than that, she was being given the opportunity to do what she had always done best: protect people who couldn't protect themselves. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed,
Madison approached Samantha in the receiving line. "Colonel Cross," Samantha said formally, then smiled. "I prefer that to Maria Valdez. Both have their place. Maria taught me things about blending in and staying invisible that Samantha never knew. What's next for you?" Samantha gestured toward the classified briefing folder she carried. The Office of Unconventional Threats has already identified 17 active cases that require investigation. Terrorist cells using unconventional recruitment methods, foreign intelligence operations targeting American infrastructure, and domestic threats that don't fit normal FBI or CIA parameters. Sounds dangerous. It is. But it's also necessary. Today's threats don't always follow the rules that our traditional security agencies were designed to handle. Sometimes you need someone who operates outside the system to protect the system. Madison nodded thoughtfully. "Will you miss being invisible?" It was an insightful question from someone who understood what it meant to live under constant surveillance and protection. Sometimes. There was a freedom in being someone who didn't matter to anyone. But there's also a responsibility that comes with having the skills to make a difference. "And if you hadn't chosen to protect me that day at Oakwood?"
Samantha was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Then I wouldn't be the person who deserved to wear this uniform. The choice to act when others can't or won't, that's what separates soldiers from civilians, protectors from bystanders." As the reception continued around them, Marcus Webb joined their conversation. "Colonel, your first briefing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The situation in Seattle requires someone with your particular expertise." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where officially we can't get involved, but unofficially American lives are at stake." Samantha smiled. "Some things never change." "No," Marcus agreed, "but now you have official authorization to do something about them." Later that evening, as Samantha sat in her new office in a secure facility outside Washington, D.C., she reviewed the files that would define her new mission. Terrorists who used social media to radicalize American teenagers. Foreign agents who infiltrated community organizations to gather intelligence. Domestic extremists who targeted government officials' families. Each case represented people who needed protection, threats that required neutralization, and problems that couldn't be solved through normal channels. It was exactly the kind of work she had been doing for 15 years, but now she would do it with resources, legal authority, and official recognition. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted number. "Welcome back to the world of the living, Ghost Watch." She typed back, "Ready for the next mission." Outside her office window, the lights of Washington, D.C. spread out like a constellation of possibilities and threats. Somewhere in that sprawling metropolitan area, people were planning harm against innocent civilians. Somewhere else, federal agents were working around the clock to identify and neutralize those threats. And now, officially, for the first time in 15 years, Samantha Cross was part of that system again. The ghost had become visible, the dead had returned to life, and America's most unconventional threats were about to discover what it meant to be hunted by someone who had spent 15 years learning to hunt in the shadows. Colonel Samantha Cross, director of the Office of Unconventional Threats, was ready to protect the people who needed protection most. And this time, she wouldn't have to do it alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.